So then this day, 26th of October 2018, talk us through the events and the experience of that day.
Oh, well, the defining thing is pain because ultimately, I have a life of pain now. It never leaves me. But that particular day, that particular year, the pain was just horrendous because it was such a simple thing. I was working, normal day. I was around my yard, and I probably dirty clothes on because I was doing things. I was lifting dirty parts and cleaning out vehicles, and again, as I said, I was a jack of all trades, king of none.
You see, just to jump in there, here's my business brain is jumping in here, and I'm wondering to myself, what in God's name is a man who employs 65 people doing out in the yard lifting benches? Because if you can run a 4 million euro business, and that's the size of a business, you can pay someone to lift a bench like that. When I say it's way below your pay grade, I don't mean that to degrade people that do
Yeah,
it. I mean you are an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, and you the best thing for you to do is focus on your business. I don't think lifting a bench falls into CEO
no,
effectiveness. If you worked for
yeah.
me, if I owned the business, I'd be going, "Fuck, are you doing, Fergus? I do not pay you to lift
Yeah,
benches."
yeah. And like, I suppose the way I looked at it, I wanted to be that person within the business that the other employees see that I wasn't afraid to do it myself. If I asked one of them to do something, they knowing that I would have done it already.
Hmm.
Now, now looking back at it, I said that's silly because ultimately I built the business, so the employees should have known that this is how I built the business. Now, I'm sorry, but I need to concentrate more so I can create more employment, create better turnover, and create a better margin within the business. You know?
Well, it's even what you said there. You said, "I'm sorry," and I'm just picking it up because I recognize how business owners think. You own the business, you employ people to do a job. You do not need to apologize
Yeah,
for insisting on they do the job. But it
yeah,
reveals a mindset, and
yeah,
I recognize it because it's maybe 20 years ago was my mindset also, and I see so many people in that mindset that somehow we build a business, but we feel apologetic for the fact that we're not in there doing the grafting. Instead of what you realized is that actually you were building something that ultimately wasn't stable and sound because of how you were. It would have been a much better, stronger business had you had those structures in place.
yeah, 100%. Like, I wanted to be, I think it was a control thing as well to a certain degree,
Yeah.
because it was my baby. And I put my sweat and tears into it. So I'm very driven that way, in terms of that. But then when I'm so driven, I find it hard to release the reins. But like I said, that's because I was in the middle of it, and that's where I think one of the most important things now is that you get that time away from it so you can start looking at it from the outside in rather than from the inside out. And you can see, I won't say your failures, but you can see better how a business can operate if you leave people in charge and give them true responsibilities, whereby they don't have that how to say like I was their safety net at all times. I was out cleaning buses at 9, 10 o'clock at night to be out in the morning. You know, I was about to drive a busload of rugby players to Northern Ireland that day. I lifted that bench, and the reason I lifted that bench is I was looking around the yard and I just said to myself, "Do you know what? That bench, somebody's going to reverse into it at night and cause a whole heap of damage to one of my vehicles. And when I'm up in Belfast, I'm going to have to make 101 phone calls to rectify the problem and reschedule the whole weekend." Like, I had a transport manager, that was their job. But I knew if that happened at 2 o'clock at night, it was me that they were going to get through to because it was my phone that was always on. And it would be me who'd have to resolve the issue about, okay, that bus can't go out in the morning. I need to put it on this job. But because that job now has changed, I need to change about 10 more buses. And next thing I'm texting and everything. That was just the environment I was in. And Yeah, it was just
So your whole mindset, in fact, and your whole way of running the business and how you did it, to some degree, led to this horrific accident. So you go to move the bench, and what happens next?
well. I called over Sean, the mechanic, and I asked him because I was had now changed into my white shirt, black pants, bus driving outfit,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm,
So I couldn't get my white shirt dirty, you know, because I was about to drive, you know, up to,
mm,
the passengers couldn't see me dirty. So I lifted up one side of the bench. Now this bench I've lifted many, many times on my own, many times. It's about 60 or 80 kgs, not heavy. So I
mm,
just lifted up one side of it and he lifted up the other side. And I lifted away from the body. And as we were bringing it across the yard, getting it out of the way, we maybe had walked 10, 15 meters at most. Next thing I got this bolt up through the back, pain. I dropped the bench. It was a pain I never felt before. But like that again, because I'm a farmer's son, you know, ex rugby player and a boss, you know, it's all those masculine things, you know. I remember dropping that bench and I didn't look up. Well, it was too much pain to look up, first of all. But I put my two hands on my knees and I looked down on the ground. And I was looking down on the ground. I was like, don't show pain. Don't show that you're hurt. You know, I'm a boss. You know what I mean? You don't, you know, I'm a man. And, you know, all those things.
mm,
So I took in 10, 12, 15 really long, deep breaths until that pain alleviated. Now, it was a pain I never felt before. And I tell you, it was sore, but it was nothing compared to what was about to happen. And at that stage, and this is where I had no clarity, I got my warning. I was after getting my warning, but did I pay heed to it? No, because I couldn't make a correct decision. You know, I was just too much going in my
mm,
mind. You know, I had to get this bench moved. I had to hop in a
mm,
coach to go and pick up a bus load. You know, there was just so many things going on in my mind to make a right decision there and then. I couldn't. And that's what I'm saying is this is where I think, you know, when you can step back from the business and get clarity and stuff like that, and you know, it helps you to make the better decisions for the long game. I picked up that bench again. He picked up the other side and took one step and bang, explosion in the middle of my back. It was like a guy, somebody put a shotgun to the middle of my back and pulled the trigger. I collapsed on the ground and I mean roared in pain. Roaring. I hadn't a clue what had happened to me. And then I realized the bench was on top of me, but I couldn't feel it on top of me. And then I realized my legs were underneath me, but I couldn't move them. And poor old Sean was looking down on top of me, wondering what was going on because there wasn't a scratch on me, you know. And yeah, and then I felt this belt melting into my skin. Felt like my belt was melting into my skin. What a weird sensation. And my concentration was to get that belt off me, thinking that would alleviate that pain. And as I was getting it off me eventually, my whole lower body just felt like it was on fire. It was like just melting plastic all over my legs. And it's that. So you asked me about what's my redeeming memory of that day. It's that burning
pain.
sensation in my legs. And yeah, it's and unfortunately, like I have 347 nerve pain for the rest of my life, and you know I'm back on my legs, I'm back on my feet, which is absolutely amazing. But I'm in pain 347. So
So right now, as we're having this conversation, there's pain.
pain, yeah, pain every minute.
Yeah.
No, look at
What
it. It's something I get used to. You know, it's part of my life now. But it took me a long,
and
long, long
on
time.
a scale of 1 to 10, what's the pain you're experiencing right now?
Oh, I suppose you get used to it, but it'll be 6 or 7.
Wow. So
Yeah,
that's it's intense pain, but it's chronic, so it's just
yeah.
what
It
you
wears me out. So
I'd say it does.
yeah, and it's
Where's you at? So you're on the ground. I presume somebody dials 999. An ambulance comes, and you're carted straight to
yeah,
hospital.
and this is where I was with my business, right? As I was lying on that ground, completely paralyzed, roaring in pain, and there's obviously people coming around the yard because there's employees coming in to pick up other buses, go off and do jobs. At Vince and Brennan in the yard, in the office, and then while all this was going on, while I was absolutely roaring in pain, completely paralyzed, I was arranging who should go off and what job. Okay, Ian, you have to come in the yard. Ian, you hop on that bus. You go and pick up my load, go to Belfast, and we'll get your job covered because we don't have to worry about your job because yours not in 45 minutes' time. while I was absolutely completely paralyzed, roaring in pain, I was still organizing everything. I still at that stage couldn't release, couldn't let go.
Yeah.
Because again, I had a transport manager, but I was still organizing everything on top of everything, so that's it's all my own fault. Like, I was just one of those people that um I wanted to be seen to be able to do everything.
I think I think again, I think that's so common among entrepreneurs. And my theory on it is that if you start a business from nothing, to get that off the ground is very, very difficult. I quote this statistic often that 95% of new businesses fail.
Really.
N-
Wow.
In 5 years' time, they don't. In 5 years' time, 95% of businesses registered
Wow.
don't exist. So Tony Robbins describes it as an Olympic level sport, and it is. Running a business is very, very difficult, very high failure level. So the first 2 or 3 years, for most people, you're working extraordinarily hard. It's all depending on you. All this activity is going on that requires you. And I think because business owners get onto that treadmill, they never change it. Like when they start bringing on a team, they don't realize it's a different skill set. But I think that what happens to you happens to almost everyone in that situation. They may not end up in such a extreme paralyzing accident as you did, but they hit a wall to some degree because how you were living mentally, physically, emotionally, you can only do that for so long. And if the accident hadn't shut you down, your body or mind would have shut you down eventually.
Yeah. And I agree with you 100% on that because I had gone to 23 stone. I was morbidly obese. And only a few years earlier, I was able to run around the rugby pitch as good as anybody else. But why was that? Because I was getting up in the morning and I had no time to sit down and have a healthy breakfast. I was getting a breakfast though. Throughout the day, then I was, having coffee, croissants, scones, chocolate bars, just to keep going. Then late at night, I'd arrive home, God only knows what hour, and I'd usually get a takeaway because, again, I'd have no time. And like my loving wife at home, she would have made a dinner, but I couldn't tell her when I'd be home or anything like that. So I completely neglected my health. And I would always say 26 was a blessing for me because there's heart problems in my family. I was going down that road where I was going to die of a massive heart attack behind the steering wheel. So 26th of October was a reset for me. I lost a lot of weight. Again, my love of exercise and fitness and conditioning and looking after myself, which I completely ignored for years because I was building that business.
We've skipped ahead now because um, you've jumped to the level of exercise you have
Yeah,
now,
sorry.
and which kind of it downplays the difficulties you then faced. Um, once you got to the hospital, they started treating you, and you saw a specialist. What did you then realize was wrong, and what did they tell you were the long term consequences of what had happened to you?
So when I obviously I got into A&E, and within A&E they told me I had to get this MRI done to see what was going on with my back, because externally you couldn't see anything. And I'll also remember being brought onto that MRI machine, and there's a rollator bed that brings you into the middle of it. And my two legs were just dangling like that underneath me. Now, every movement was horrific. So obviously, just getting onto it was crucified. But when came out the far side and the imagery was red, and that's when the alarm bell started ringing. And a doctor who came into Dr. Cullen, who he was off duty, but he came in and sat down beside me and just said, now, he didn't tell me what was wrong. He just said, you're in a bit of trouble here now, Fergus. Um, we have 12 hours to operate on you to take the pressure off the spine. And but the problem is we don't have the expertise here. We'll have to send you to Dublin. So between the jigs and the reels, the blue lit me to Dublin, which is a journey I'll never, ever, ever, ever want to relive. It was horrific. And again, as a former bus driver, I knew exactly how long it was going to take. I nearly knew the signs as I was passing by where exactly I was on the road.
Had they given you something for the pain at this stage?
Yeah,
Morphine or
they did,
something?
but
Yeah, but it wasn't enough.
no, nothing like
Wow.
it's a different pain. Nerve pain is completely different than it. My whole lower body was just on fire, and any little
Yeah.
movement, even a vibration, was just going
So
through.
stopping, starting,
Yeah, it was like
yeah, everything.
that journey was like I had my hand in an electric fence for the whole journey. Shock after
Oh,
shock after shock after shock.
yeah.
So when I got to the the National Spinal Injuries Unit up in the Mara Hospital, all I wanted to do was get that operation done. I hadn't been told what was wrong with me as such at this stage, and if I had been, I definitely don't remember it. But all I wanted to do was get this operation done because in my mind, operation done, I'll come out the far side, I'll have maybe movement back, I'll have less pain, I might have feelings back. I'll be improved. That was what was going through my mind. So I signed off on that waiver form straight away. And then we went, I think it was a 9.5 hour operation, came out the far side, and I woke up and I was no better off in any shape or form. I was actually worse off because I realised I had a catheter and a nappy on me as well. So I was actually not just paralysed from my waist down, it was my belly button down. I lost my bowel and bladder as well. So you can imagine how dark things went very quickly.
Yeah.
And
So now you're into the psychological trauma on top of the physical trauma.
yeah, and like no matter what you do, nobody prepares you for this. Nobody prepares you for this. And it will affect every fiber of who you are. The minute you lose your independence and become dependent on absolutely everybody around you, it destroys you. It absolutely destroys, especially when you've had a life of running around pitches, building a big business, family. You've had a full, fulfilled, in your opinion, what you think has been a full, fulfilling life. Next minute, you're left with this. So that evening, I wasn't told exactly what happened to me, but the next day, the surgeon came back into me, and that's when I found out exactly what happened to me. He told me I had rushed with T9, T10. T10 went through spinal cord and severed by 90%. And I was told basically, if I get moving within 72 hours, I have a 5% chance of getting some sort of strength. 5%
5%.
chance. But if I don't get movement after 72 hours, 0%.
You're never walking
Yeah.
again.
And I didn't get movement after 72 hours. 21 days later, I moved my big right toe. So,
So you're lying in a hospital bed
yeah.
and you're hoping that within the next 72 hours you can move a toe or a foot or something,
Yeah.
and you've no movement.
No. Nothing. No movement, no feelings, and a horrific pain.
Two questions. First question is, at what point, if any, did that pain begin to ease?
I can't remember the time when it actually kind of eased or
So an extraordinarily long amount of time with that
oh
pain.
yeah, there was. I was never in hospital. Like I spent a long time in hospital where the pain was easy. Even when I was tapping the morphine drip, tap 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 tap, that was only giving me a sense of drowsiness. It wasn't giving me relief from pain. It was just giving me. It was relaxing me.
How long did you spend in hospital?
8 9 months.
8 9 months. And so for the first 21 days, were they still trying to get movement, or how does that
Well, no,
how
no,
does that work?
you're just left there. The first, until you get into the National Rehabilitation Hospital, which is 16 to 18 week window, I was told at the time, they really don't do anything with you because,
Except leave you
I was
there.
a grade A spinal cord injury. I had to let my back repair, where that operated on. So there was no
Yeah.
movement. Like for the first 5 or 6 days, there was literally no movement. I was lying on my back, staring at a ceiling, like not roaring in pain, but just in horrific pain. And I couldn't how they would move you after the 5 or 6 days was two aides would come in and put you onto your left shoulder. 2 hours later, they put you on your back again, and 2 hours later, they put onto the other shoulder, so you wouldn't get bed sores. That's how incapacitated I was.
That was your activity levels.
Yeah, and then I ended up getting two big, massive clots in my lungs while I was in so I was. That was actually more scary than the actual accident because When the accident happened, I was surrounded by people I work with who I know
Yeah.
have no clue about medical stuff. But when you see like high level medical people getting very, very, very nervous around you, that's when you get frightened.
Mm.
And yeah, I had two massive locked lungs, very high up in my lungs. Now, look, I came through it, and all was good. But like that's when they're the. I nearly have more. How do I say? I nearly have more
Fear.
issues over that situation than the actual
Mm.
accident because when the experts start panicking, you know,
Yeah. 'Cause
you know
you're
you're in
completely
trouble.
dependent then.